Hiya, and welcome to the Wise Yourself Up podcast. I'm your host, Carla McGreevy, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about all the resistance that we meet in healing. What is the crack? I was so sick this week, it's been awful. You can probably still hear it in my voice. I was like in a coma. My housemate Katrina didn't even know I was alive. I didn't surface Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, completely comatose. I kept on being like, today's the day I'm going to get up. Never happened. Thursday was the first I surfaced. And then Friday, I was actually able to stand up. And this weekend, I've had to take it easy. I'm recording this just after new moon skies in Sagittarius. That's a hard word for me. On Sunday, the 1st of December. So it's really, I love when a new season begins with a new moon. It's a real clean slate, really energetically powerful, for a time for dreaming and hopefully for me getting better. I think there's a lot of it going about from what I hear, and I have been on gargling salt water, eating honey, which makes me want to throw up, all the things. I'm on everything trying to get better. And I had to get a private prescription for antibiotics because I need to get better. And I'm dying to move. I haven't moved. Well, I did like 20 minutes of yoga yesterday and I'm just not energetically there yet. So hopefully another good day's eating or I'll be back. I finished a book. I haven't found a fiction book that I've devoured in a long time. The recent fiction books that I've read have been a struggle. And this was under, like, loads of people recommended this on Insta stories. And do you know Katie, who was on the podcast? She recommended it. And it's called The Heart's Invisible Furies. Oh my God, so good. Had a good cry at it. It's a really beautiful novel about a guy from the 1940s into 2010s, if that's what you call it. And it's about being gay through that period in time, and it's a really powerful piece. I really, really loved it, and so I'd really recommend that. I think I talked about Say Nothing, this TV series, in the last episode. I can't remember now. My memory's not great this week, but it was so good. It was so brilliantly done. Say Nothing. So if you haven't watched that on Disney, definitely do, especially if you're not from the North. It tells the tale of the Troubles from the lens of the Dolores sisters. So I really, really enjoyed that, especially as my mummy would have been interned at the similar time to that. And just the complexities of the North and, the horrors that went on. And yeah, then I suppose the McGregor case has been, I don't even know if I want to mention his name, but Nikita Hand is some woman, incredibly courageous, and it's amazing what she was able to do and what she's done for the movement for people who have suffered sexual abuse at the hands of people of such power. She was offered 1 million to settle out of court, and she chose justice over that and put herself through the trolls who are still abusing her now online. Yeah, just what an incredible story. And she's helped so many people. Rape crisis have shared that the calls have went up like 50% during that period, and people are able to get the help that they need. And no matter what time has passed from your sexual trauma, you can always offer healing to those parts and get the help that you need. Even women who have held sexual trauma in for up to 20 years have shared with me the relief, and they didn't even realize that they could get relief or feel some degree of healing for what happened to them, even though I suppose that's what always comes up. Some people who have experienced it say, talking about it doesn't change what happens, doesn't change the pain, so what's the point? But there is such power in the spoken word, and trust in what you need to do to heal those parts. So sending loads of love to Nikita Hand and her journey in healing and recovering from the trauma of the court case, on top of what happened in 2016, or was it 2018? I think it was 2018. So, in today's episode, I wanted to talk about resistance to healing. This is a big part of my journey. It's a big theme in my work because my work and what I write and who I write content for, it's not for people who embrace healing with open arms. It's for people who are like me. Most of you are brats like me. I have the brat tap on today, just by coincidence, who resist healing because we are the generation of brats who are used to instant gratification, want everything yesterday. And, we don't really like to be vulnerable. So healing's hard for us. And I just want to talk about the resistance that you can meet, whether you're a brat or whether you're not a brat. I offered a poll on Instagram because I'm offering a free workshop. It's actually, so this goes out on the 4th of December. So next Tuesday, and I hope you join me. So many people have signed up already. So it's so exciting. And it's going to be a really great night online, all cozy in our houses. I was debating what to offer the workshop on, and I offered for popular topics that I work with people on. And one of them was just the broad topic of resistance to healing. I wanted to ask, did people understand that? And 30% of the people who engaged with these stories said no, they didn't. And so I wanted to cover that today. And so next Tuesday, by the way, I am holding a free workshop on healing your inner child. And I'll talk more about it through this piece today. I think one of the I don't even know if it's a misconception. Well, maybe it was a misconception that I definitely had. I thought, oh, you want to heal, you heal, and sure, that's done, right? This is 10 years ago. So obviously the word of healing has changed. A lot of people are on the healing path now. Therapy is so big now, and holistic therapies. And, it's a big movement that people are taking care of their mind and bodies and see them as one, how much the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind, which is all great. However, I think that this still applies to how I felt 10 years ago, that when I started my healing journey, it wasn't me meets healing equals healed. It was me meets healing equals resistance and suffering and frustration. And I don't know why this is the way it is for most of us. Like, why can't life just be simple? But I suppose that's what everybody talks about. All the religions, all the teachers talk about suffering as part of life. And definitely the resistance to healing can be a lot of suffering. And I'll give an example of this. One of the things that can happen is the resistance can be so strong because unconsciously we have chosen all these strategies, all these behaviors to cope and survive. Okay. So, for example, we have unconsciously chosen to make our lives so fast and so full to avoid discomfort, the discomfort of pain, because we weren't taught how to sit and be with it. So we have very fast food lives to avoid feeling pain, and also to avoid ourselves, to avoid difficult emotions because we weren't taught how to process them. And as a response to trauma, we didn't have the support and tools and education in place when we first met trauma as children. So we unconsciously, more than likely, copied the parents' behaviors and their relation to emotions. And then we adapted our own strategies. So naturally, because these have been in place so long, it can be very strong resistance we meet when we're asked to change them, because naturally we feel safe and this is what we know. And to go into the unknown, especially when we have unprocessed trauma, that is hugely difficult. And it's not until that we process the trauma and learn to feel safe again that we can begin to look at changing our behaviors and strategies and the ways that we move through this world. And so it's a very prominent memory for me that I probably share a lot, is when I first had my first consultation with a therapist. So my therapist didn't charge me. So it's similar to what I offer as well. I offer a consultation because you have to connect with the person for the work to work, and that's important. And you don't have a connection with everybody. So Tracy, very lovely, gave me a free consultation, and I knew instantly that I wanted to work with Tracy. It was a very visceral feeling for me. and there was no doubt in my mind that she was the one for me. However, in my first session, I'll share this with you. This is how resistant I was. I told my whole story, didn't shed a tear. And it wasn't until, so say the session was, it might have been an hour. I can't remember if it was 30 minutes in an hour. It was in person. And this is the gigs of 10 years ago in therapy in the north of Ireland, was that it was on Sunnyside Street, which is just off the Armour Road. So it would have been a part of Belfast that from West Belfast, people from West Belfast didn't leave West Belfast because of the Troubles. And, my mum didn't drive and my grandparents didn't drive. So I basically just ran about West Belfast most of my life until I learned to drive. But even again, like I wouldn't have been around the Armour Road much. Anyway, so I went over to the Armour Road for this therapy session, and it was at the side of a paint shop on Sunnyside Street and an unmarked door. And I think there was the tiniest of sticker that said Sunnyside Clinic. You wouldn't have been able to recognise it from looking at the door, studying the door, that it was a therapist that lived inside. And I think that shows how hidden mental health is or was. And that element obviously is still very much at play. And just the degree of shame that is around therapy or was around therapy, definitely for our parents and grandparents' generation, because everything had to be so top secret. And I even remember in my first therapy sessions that there would always be a 15-minute gap. So you would never see the person coming in and out of therapy, which would never happen in a doctor's surgery, right? Where it was really taboo if I knew a client of my psychologist, which, it reveals a lot in our attitude towards going to therapy. And I'm not sure if that's changed or not, or what the crack is with that, but that was definitely the case. And one day I did bump into someone. There was just a conflict or something rang late one day. And then my therapist had to ask me how I felt about that. And I genuinely didn't mind, but it's interesting. And no wonder so many people find it so difficult to start therapy due to that history of shame around getting help. And so in my first session, I was stone cold. She probably thought that like there was something really wrong with me. So the word is sociopath, that I was so numb and cold. But at the end of the session, I maybe let out like a wee tiny tear snuck out because I started speaking about my grandparents, I think it was. So I remember years later, or probably a year later, asking Tracy her first impression of me. And it was that, I was very hard and very cold, but she was relieved that I showed some emotion at the end, or else, she probably had a work cut out for her. At the end of the session, so I'm just trying to give you a visual of this, a girl talking about these horrible things that happened in her life, stone cold, not showing any emotion to it, and at the end showing a wee tiny bit. And at that time I probably was exercising crazy amounts, never stopped, very fast life, and didn't realize that, that all facilitated me not feeling these unconscious ways that we all choose to cope and avoid. At the end of the session, Tracy said to me, and I'll never forget it, I was just about to exit the door, and Tracy said to me, "Be gentle." And it haunted me. I remember thinking, what is she talking about? Be gentle. And it was like a puzzle she gave me, because I couldn't understand. I didn't understand what be gentle meant. I was like, why is she saying that to me? And it wasn't until like maybe a year or more on this journey of, starting yoga and going to therapy that I realized how not gentle I was with myself, how brutal I was with myself, how forceful, how mean, and I know a lot of you identify with that, not giving yourself rest, overworking yourself, saying mean things to yourself constantly. There's just no tenderness, no gentleness, and healing is exactly that, You're attending to yourself like you would a newborn baby. You're just so gentle with yourself, and those sore spots that need that. Like, you don't be rough with cuts and wounds, but yet that's exactly what way we can unconsciously be with those parts of ourselves. And so a lot of you and a lot of us, what happen is when we go to therapy, is the therapist can give us advice that we don't even understand what they're saying because we're not ready to hear it yet, or we haven't processed enough trauma yet. Because once we process trauma, we are more connected to ourselves and we are more able to feel a range of emotions. We're bringing everything back online, right? We're coming out of fight flight mode and we're able to access tenderness and gentleness again. But just to share that is a common experience of that resistance to understanding what the therapist or whoever you're working with is asking you to do. And that remember that it will make sense when you're ready. So sometimes you're given wee puzzles that you don't work out until months or years later. I want to share another piece of resistance that a few of my friends have who might be raging that I'm saying this, okay? Some of them, and this is so true, they think that they're too smart to be helped, which is a very clever defense mechanism because they are incredibly intelligent, but that does not mean that they can heal themselves no matter how intelligent you are. Because intelligence, in the sense that they're assessing themselves, is all about IQ, right? It's all about the left hand side of the brain, the English, the maths, the making sense, the analytical. That, we're not talking about intelligence in terms of music and dance and play here. We're talking about it in the very Western school education system here. And that has nothing to do with healing. And don't get me wrong, psychologists and doctors are very smart in that sense. They score very well in that sense of IQ. But healing has nothing to do with those things. That's another thing, is your attachment. My attachment, absolutely, to my brain was my resistance to healing. And that's something that we all share. That's what Tara Brach talks about. We're all addicted to thinking, which is resistance in itself. It's a sign that we don't feel safe because we're thinking all the time. The brain is a protection. It's wired to think negatively to protect us. So a sign that we are resisting healing is when we're not thinking mode, because to heal we have to be in rest and digest. And we know that from looking after little babies and, when we're healing in hospital, that we need to be in that state, in that balanced state for healing to occur. And also that story or belief that some people can have that, there's no one smart enough to help me. It's linked usually back to an abandonment wound from probably your mother in childhood, which it tends to be like a common theme or a common experience. For toxic, if your mother had depression, say, when you were very young, or there was a traumatic incident and your needs weren't met and you became very independent very young, and you were mirrored, that's such a hard word for someone from Belfast to say. You were mirrored in the way that a small child needs to be. And that's through no fault of your mother or your father's if they were going through a very difficult time in terms of depression for toxic. But it would make sense then as to why you tell yourself this story that there's no one that can help you, that there's no one intelligent enough or X, Y, and Z enough to help you. That would bring up a very old and deep wound of that vulnerability of being a small baby or a toddler and your needs not being met. But of course, you can get help through therapists and people who can help you work with that very young part to be able to access support in your adult life, because everybody needs help. No one can do it alone. Another part of our resistance to healing is the environment we live in. It's capitalism wants us to believe we have to do it all alone, and it's so indoctrinated into us. This is a big part for women. The Brene Burns research shows it's so difficult to say that I can't do it all and that I need help. That triggers a lot of shame for women. That's what Brene Brown's research showed, that the biggest driver of shame for women is that I can't do it all. And appearing weak was the biggest driver of shame for men. And so to look at that for yourself, if that's relevant for you in accessing help and support and trying new things in the healing world, whatever that may look like for you, whether that's talk therapy, breath work, yoga, whatever it is. And that point in itself is complex too, because there's a quote, and I'm not going to butcher the guy who said this quote, but I'll share it in the voice notes. It's hard to be well in a sick environment, you know? So that's why it's so hard for us to ask for help, because the environment is asking us not to. And that's why healing is such an act of rebellion against the patriarchy and capitalism, and also why it's so fucking hard. If you've been listening this far into the podcast, first of all, thank you so, so much. I just love the gorgeous community that is building with this podcast. I wanted to interrupt just to say that if you're feeling stuck and you feel like you're going around in circles with your healing journey, it can be a sign that you are too much in your head when it comes to healing. The body communicates 80-20 to the brain, and that's why a bottom approach works best, which is what I offer. The body and breath are the true vehicles for change. To breathe is to feel, is to heal. So if you're ready to finally truly love yourself and listen to what your body is trying to communicate to you, I offer online one-to-one therapeutic sessions to help you to do this. In the sessions, we work together using breath work, somatic movement, to help you move through any resistance you're currently holding, and to help you get to the heart of what your body is really trying to tell you. And that's where I come in. I can help you see where the body and the mind are telling two different things, and it's to remember that the body always tells the truth. So if you're someone who's really ready to go all in on your healing journey, head to the link in my show notes to apply to work with me one-to-one. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Resistance can come up in not thinking that you're worthy of help, which breaks my heart. Self-worth can really make it difficult for some people to access help. They're so unused to taking up space and being seen, and it's frightening for them. They think that they always have to be the one helping others, and they aren't worthy of being helped. And it's to remember that it's give and take. You know, there's times in our lives where we will be the helper and we will be the ones asking for help. What really helps me with this is, you know, it's very easy, and I've done this in my life and I've shared this in the podcast, to be the person who's like, oh, they have an addiction, they need to do X, Y, and Z, they should really go to therapy. Whenever we catch that judgment in ourselves of others, it's always to check in with ourselves and say, well, what am I doing for healing and to take care of myself when I'm asking someone else to do this? You know, don't ask others to do what you aren't doing yourself. Don't ask someone to go to therapy if you're not in therapy or have never been, because that's the biggest way we can influence another, is by action, not by talking. And so, yeah, and I think that's really important. You know, if you have someone in your life who really struggles with mental health, addiction, or any of those things, that's a powerful way that you can help them, by realizing how difficult it is to look at the most powerful, the most painful, not powerful, sorry. So the most painful parts of our life are the most powerful parts of our lives too. But to actually, you know, walk the walk and realize how incredibly hard it is. And that's another quote of Brene Brown, is one of the most courageous acts that we can ever do of our life is look at our emotional wounds, because the research shows that we would rather sit with our physical pain than emotional wounds. And to not give up hope that you meet so much resistance in your healing journey, but this is just totally normal and part of it, especially depending on the way that your culture, your community, your family, the way you've been brought up to look at mental health and getting help. Another piece of the resistance in healing is they're going to ask you to do the things that you don't want to do. I actually don't know anyone who's probably listening to this podcast whose life isn't extremely fast and way too full. And it's to remember that we unconsciously chose these behaviors and strategies to cope and survive from trauma. And everybody's got childhood trauma. And if you had a privileged upbringing, it's going to be more difficult for you to identify that trauma. And that is really hard. Gabor talks about the happy childhood syndrome, where people really believe they had this really happy childhood, nothing problematic happened, and that's just not true. And that's something I'll talk about another day. We love our parents because you love your parents so much and they did so much for you. There's that guilt of connecting to the truth of the times when they did let you down and didn't meet your needs, which happened to everybody. Okay. Back to what I was saying is, we employ these strategies so unconsciously early on. So no wonder it's so hard when we are made aware that these ways of constantly living a life that makes us so exhausted that we have to change that. We're like, no, I love this life. I love being on the verge of burnout every second week. That of course it's what we've always known. No wonder we're gonna find it really hard to give it up. And I've got loads of gorgeous stories of, people who were diagnosed with cancer who were like, I cannot give up work. Absolutely not. But in time that they do, initially it can be like, it can feel impossible to live your life a different way. But there's a part of you that knows that you need to live your life a different way. And in months and in maybe years, you will change. It's just not instant and yesterday the way your mind would like it. And I'm definitely talking to myself there. So if it connects with you, happy days. And the resistance is to protect too of change, the fear of doing things differently, the fear of living your life a different way, because it is going to bring change, which is incredibly exciting because, well, I don't believe we would be embarking on a healing journey if we didn't desire change, for things to be different, for us to desire more love, more joy, more pleasure, more play, and a more abundant life. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't want all the sexy stuff, right? But yet there's so much fear because normally we have to meet all the really uncomfortable stuff that we've avoided for a long time to get to all those joyous places. And it's to be really gentle with the resistance that you see in yourself, that addiction to thinking, doing. There can be an addiction to feeling anxious because if you're anxious, you think that if you stay on high alert long enough and think hard enough, then you can protect everybody. It's not your job to protect everybody. And that's something that you took on very early in your life. And that these all serve a purpose, not to judge it as bad, to get really curious as to what good it does for you, even though it's causing your current suffering. It's the same as addiction. Someone can be like, I really want to stop drinking so much. And they could hate themselves for their drinking, but it's always, what is that drinking doing for you? And looking at the wound that it's soothing. And then you can work with the material much, much better from that place. And also on the piece of resistance, most people, right, there is stories. I've read them in books. I've met them who are changed in one gong in a sound bath, in one plant ceremony, in one mushroom trip, and one wag night of ease. I've heard it all, where their hearts have changed and they lived a different life. I've even heard a drug addict tell me that God descended upon him and he never touched drug or drinks again. And he said this happened when he's like 30 and he's in his 50s now. I absolutely believe what they tell me. Why would they make it up? However, it never happened to me. And I don't think it happens for most of us. Most of us, and this is what Gabor Mate talks about too, it's a long road. You meet a lot of resistance and it takes a lot of softening to move through that resistance. But because we have a tendency to, again, because of the patriarchy, capitalism, push harder, force our way through things. And that just doesn't apply to healing. It doesn't apply to coming home to yourself. The path is like water. It is soft. It is gentle. It is tender. And unfortunately, it is fucking slow for most of us. And on a final note, I'll share James Clemens, who runs the Breath Space online. It's a great page about breath work. He talks about, our nervous systems are so wired for chaos, and especially if you're from the north of Ireland, the legacy of the Troubles, intergenerational trauma. Safety and rest can feel very, very frightening. And so it's a process and a journey to learn to get used to feeling safe and to let go of that attachment to what we've always known, which is chaos, and just keep in mind what it is that you want. your desires for your health, your body, and your mind. And this attachment to the resistance to healing causes us our authenticity. Just another wee thing to finish this section on, which is important to remember. It's costing us some of our brilliant pieces of creativity, which wants to be born of us, from really knowing ourselves. Attachment and authenticity run in alignment with each other. And so when we're too attached, like in a relationship, when you stop being yourself just to stay attached to the person, that's the way it works. And so the more we become calm, obviously we have to have a degree of attachment or else we wouldn't survive, right? But it's all balance. And if we're super attached, then there will be the price of authenticity in our lives. And if you want more of that, it's just learning to soft that attachment and to open up to new ways of moving through your life. And I hope that helps anyone who meets a lot of resistance to healing. I am your woman for this topic because I was so resistant in so many ways. And, it's to remember too, it's, when we were told thousands of years ago when we believed the earth was flat and then we were told it was round, do you think we just received that information with open arms? Absolutely not. And this era that we're in of your childhood impacts your adulthood, of childhood trauma, of children being incredibly intelligent sensory beings, not cognitive beings, but sensory beings. It's all new information, so it's natural to be dubious, but lived experience has proved to me that it's correct. And I hope you enjoy your journey of your lived experience and of all that it can offer you in healing and the path to everything that it is that you want and desire in your life. My final notes is, my dad was so resistant to this. He was thought it was just a load of shite. But that's also it was just his resistance to sitting with pain and looking at things. And some people are unconsciously, uncomfortably comfortable, you know? And that's definitely what he was. He was like, oh, I don't need therapy. But I didn't think he realized how much he was resisting himself and how much more was there to access. And that just wasn't for him in his time, you know? Also, I just briefly want to touch on the money thing. Some people don't have the money to access healing, and a lot of people do. And it's your choice how you spend your money. I'm not going to lecture people. I'm just trying to encourage people to move through the resistance that comes with healing. And if you have the means to afford therapy, look at your relationship to money, look at your relationship to how you spend money, because some people say, oh, I can't afford therapy, and they get Botox and spend £200 on clothes every month. That is absolutely their choice. But you can't say that you can't afford therapy. Just say it's not a priority for me right now. I suppose I notice that in some people I speak to. Now, not obviously my clients or anybody, but it's just my friendship circles. And this shows that they're not really ready to access help yet. But I've also had to have those honest conversations with people to be like, if you can afford Botox, be serious in your reasons and telling me why you're not going to therapy when they really need it. I hope this makes sense into why healing is so hard, why there is so much resistance, and I hope it helps you move through some of it. Please get in touch with any of your thoughts, comments, feelings, leave a review, and please join me on the 10th of December. I have been busy working on a brand new course that I've created that is coming. It's going on sale on the 10th of December, so I'm offering this free workshop to launch it. Of course, I'm going to sell my course, but you won't be forced into anything. You're more than welcome to come to this workshop. You will have an experience. And yeah, I really want you to experience something. And I can't tell you what the something is because I don't know what it is. It's going to come up for you, right? I want you to understand the science and the philosophy around healing your inner child, especially if you're like me who thought it was a load of shit. I can remember my childhood. It was quite an uncomfortable time that I didn't like and I didn't want to connect back to it. So I'm going to cover that in this if you're similar to me. and some tools that you can actually use so that everybody can access this support regardless of your financial situation at the minute. So please join me on the 10th of December. There should be a link to join the free workshop. It's on Zoom. You'll need a paper and pen. And that's it. I'm hoping you're enjoying Christmas. I think I'm going to watch Home Alone tonight and get into the feel of it and do some shopping from the comfort of this sofa. Take such good care of yourself, and I hope to see you all next week.